All right, welcome back, everyone. Ready for another deep dive?
Always.
Today, we're going to tackle something pretty intense. It's the Day of Atonement in ancient Israel.
Oh, this is a good one.
It is. We're looking at Leviticus chapter 16. And let me tell you, this is not your average holiday celebration.
Not at all.
No. Picture this. Ancient Israel, a society totally obsessed with ritual purity. Their whole relationship with God was like constantly hanging in the balance.
Yeah.
And in this setting, right, that we find one of the most fascinating, intense, and honestly kind of bizarre rituals in all the scripture.
Yeah, you really hit the nail on the head there. It's really striking, actually, how this chapter begins. It just kind of throws us right into the thick of it. You know, with the death of Aaron's sons.
Oh, yeah.
Like, boom, right off the bat, this stark reminder, like a warning almost, about the power and holiness of God, the divine, and what can happen if you approach it too casually.
Yeah, no kidding. It's like, pay attention. This is serious stuff right from the start. Leviticus sets the stage for a day that's all about being careful, being observant. It's a day when, really, the fate of the entire community is on the line.
And that gravity, that serious tone, it's reflected in every single detail of the ritual. It's not symbolic. Like, this wasn't just, a gesture. It was carefully planned out, orchestrated, really, with these deep, deep theological and social implications.
Okay, so let's break it down. Let's walk through this elaborate ritual. So first you've got the high priest all decked out, right? Pure linen garments, enters the most holy place, the Holy of Holies. It's all about being pure and clean, right?
Absolutely.
But then you have these two goats, and this is where things get really interesting.
Yeah, the two goats are essential. They're absolutely central to understanding this whole Day of Atonement. One goat is for Yahweh, the God of Israel, and that represents a direct offering to atone for the people's sins. But the other goat is for Azazel.
Azazel? Okay, now there's a name that gives you chills.
That's a good one.
I mean, it's not just a cool word. It's where we get the term scapegoat.
Exactly. It is. And that's why understanding this Azazel goat, this concept, it helps us really grasp how the ancient Israelites thought about collective guilt. The need for purification. The high priest would confess all the sins of the community onto the goat's head.
Wow. Talk about a lot of baggage for one goat.
Right.
But wait, it gets even crazier. They send this goat out into the wilderness, into, like the text says, an inaccessible land.
Yeah.
It's like they're physically getting rid of their sin, just removing it from the community. Poof. Gone.
It is. It's a powerful image. This ritual, this expulsion, getting rid of sin, and it's all on the scapegoat. It really makes you think, what did this represent for the people? Was it just symbolic? Or was there something deeper there, psychologically and socially? Did sending this goat away, did it actually make them feel less guilty? Or was it just, temporary relief?
That's a great question. It makes you think about how we still today, right, we grapple with guilt. We grapple with blame. We want a clean slate, a fresh start. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's go back to the ritual itself. So we have the goats, the high priest in his fancy linen outfit. But there's also, there's a lot of incense burning and blood involved.
Oh, absolutely. Lots of incense and blood. Burning the incense created a cloud. And that symbolized God's presence, but it also was kind of like a protective veil, a screen almost. And then, of course, there's the blood. Sprinkled on the altar and the Ark of the Covenant's cover, the atonement lid. Blood symbolized life, and it symbolized atonement.
It all seems so visceral, so real and raw. Like you can almost feel how weighty that moment was for them, how intensely they believed. It wasn't just for show, though, was it? There's a very practical element to it, too.
You're right. The Day of Atonement wasn't just about saying, I'm sorry. It was about purification, cleansing the sacred space, the meeting tent, and even purifying the people themselves.
Oh, yeah. They were serious about this whole purification thing. They even burned the sacrificial animals outside the camp. Like, they wanted to get rid of every last little bit of impurity.
Every trace. It's amazing, isn't it, how this need, this deep desire, to be pure and clean, how it shows up throughout history. It's not just the Israelites. So many cultures have these rituals, about cleansing and renewal and fresh starts.
Oh, yeah. I get it. It's like cleaning, but for your soul.
Yeah.
So, okay, we've got this intense ritual, this dramatic, like getting rid of sin, this purification process. It's serious stuff. It all points to a society, that's super invested in keeping their relationship with God right. But it wasn't just a one-time thing, was it? Like you do it and you're good.
No, not at all. Leviticus calls it a perpetual statute, meaning it had to happen every year, year after year. This wasn't a quick fix. It was like an ongoing commitment to asking for forgiveness and keeping things right with God.
It makes you think about their religious practices, how they were cyclical, like a rhythm, sin, confession, atonement, renewal, over and over. It was woven into their whole year. And speaking of cycles, isn't it interesting how the high priest, that role was passed down. The text is so specific about who could be the high priest. It was a big deal.
It was. And the part about the high priest being anointed and ordained, that says a lot about how important tradition was to them. It wasn't just about one guy. It was about making sure that connection, that vital connection to God, that it would stay strong for future generations. It really makes you think about what that meant, though, for the high priest, having all the weight of the community's sins on his shoulders. Was it like a powerful position, or was it more of a burden,
A lot of pressure, anxiety, yeah. It's like he was the go-between, the people and God, a bridge between, like, the human world and the holy. But let's be real, all this talk about ancient rituals and sacrifices, it feels a little, old-fashioned, a little out there. What's it got to do with us today? Why should we care about these outdated practices?
That's a fair question, totally. But I think underneath all of this, underneath these ancient rituals, are some real, lasting truths. And those truths, they still resonate. For one, the Day of Atonement was about owning up to what you did wrong, both as an individual and as a community. It was about admitting that humans aren't perfect, and that we need to be made right, reconciled.
Okay, I can see that. We all mess up. Everybody's got regrets. But we don't have a set ritual for dealing with those feelings anymore. We don't have goats, sprinkle blood around. So how do we do it? How do we approach these feelings in the modern world?
Well, the Israelites had this structure, this way of dealing with their shortcomings. They'd confess, atone. They had this whole process. It was a real tangible way of dealing with guilt and sin, which are not tangible. Today, we might not have the same rituals, but we still look for ways to atone, to make things right, to, have that renewal.
So you're saying even though we don't have a Day of Atonement, we still need it. We still, struggle with right and wrong, guilt and forgiveness.
Exactly. Think about it. We have therapy, support groups, confession and religion, community service even. These are all ways, maybe modern ways of trying to do what the Day of Atonement was all about. We're trying to admit we messed up, make amends, and get a fresh start.
Wow. I'm starting to see these rituals in a whole new light. It's like they're a reflection of being human, this fight we have, coming to terms with the fact that we're not perfect.
And the scapegoat, that whole idea, it's still around, even though we're not sending goats into the desert anymore. We see it in politics, on social media, even with our families and friends.
You mean blaming other people for our problems, finding someone to, take the fall?
Exactly. It's a human thing, isn't it? To want to blame someone else. To have somewhere to put our own mistakes. The scapegoat ritual, even if it sounds weird, it shows that tendency, that human tendency. And it makes you think, is this just part of who we are? Is there a way to stop doing that? Stop the blame and the scapegoating?
Those are some deep questions. Yeah. But you're right, this scapegoat thing, it's so relevant to how we see society, how we understand our own behavior even.
And don't forget about the purification. We might not have a specific way to wash ourselves, but we still look for things that make us feel clean, renewed, ready for a fresh start, body and mind.
It's like hitting the reset button.
Right.
And it seems like those practices, they can be really personal. What works for one person might not work for another.
Right. Some people meditate. Some people love being in nature. Others, they get creative or they exercise.
Yeah. It's about what works for you. What helps you get rid of the stuff that's bringing you down, your own personal baggage and negativity. Whether it's every day or once a year, it's about creating space to start fresh.
Exactly.
This is so interesting. It's like we're going back in time, peeling back these layers of history and finding these truths about what it means to be human. Who knew that Leviticus could be so relevant to our lives today?
It really is a testament to the power of these old texts. They're thousands of years old, but they're still talking about the big questions, the questions we still ask today.
And sometimes it takes a deep dive like this, looking closely at these old practices, to realize that we're not that different from the people who came before us. We might not sacrifice goats, but we still want to atone. We still want to be purified. And yeah, we still try to scapegoat others.
Okay, so we've talked a lot about this ancient ritual, all the symbolism, and even how it connects to us today. But I'm still wondering, is there, something we can take away from this practically. Something we can actually use in our own lives. Not just the history part, but like how to live.
I think that's the real question, isn't it? What can we actually learn from all of this?
Yeah.
One big thing that stands out to me is taking responsibility for our actions. The Israelites, they had their way, right? Confession and atonement, it was all laid out, very formal. But the idea behind it, it's universal. We all make mistakes. The question is, what do we do about it?
So are you saying that instead of sending a goat out to the desert, we need to like own up to our mess ups and make things right if we can, and then move on? It sounds a lot easier than it actually is. Oh, you're absolutely right. It's not easy. But that's the thing. The Day of Atonement, it reminds us that we have to face our shortcomings. That's how we grow. It's about realizing that our choices, they matter. They affect other people. And then, trying to fix any damage we've caused. It's not about feeling guilty all the time. It's about using that guilt to become better.
So maybe it's not about waiting for a special day, like they did with the Day of Atonement, but more like making that accountability a part of everyday life. Catching ourselves when we want to blame someone else, thinking about what we do, even little things, how they affect the people around us.
Yeah, that's it. It's about being aware, realizing that our choices have consequences, and it's not always some big grand gesture. It's the little everyday choices that make us who we are.
Okay. Accountability.
Yeah.
Got it. Anything else we can learn from this ancient ritual? What about all that purification stuff? Is that still relevant today?
Totally. We might not have to, wash ourselves in some specific way, but we still need those things that help us feel clean and new, inside and out. It's about making space for a fresh start, and that looks different for everybody.
I like how you put that. It's not a one-time thing. It's a practice, something we keep doing. So less about, some big dramatic cleansing and more about finding what helps us declutter and reset, like recharge ourselves, make it a part of life.
Exactly. It could be meditation or being out in nature, being creative, exercising, even just a long walk. It's about finding what works for you, what helps you get rid of the junk, the negativity and stuff that weighs you down.
Like a personal Day of Atonement made just for you, for modern life. Who knew we could find so much good stuff in an ancient ritual about sacrificing goats and blood?
It really shows you how powerful these old texts are. They give us a look into the human experience, these struggles that connect us all, across cultures, across time.
This has been amazing. From all the details of the ritual to that scapegoat, and now all these things we can learn about being accountable and starting fresh.
And maybe next time you hear someone called a scapegoat, you'll think back to that goat, wandering in the wilderness, carrying all that stuff. Maybe you'll see things a little differently. Understand the whole blame thing better. How we all want someone else to take the fall. How much we want a clean slate.
Wow. Definitely something to think about.
Okay.
Well, that's it for today's deep dive. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking questions, and keep diving deep.